Okay, today's Python is going to be short and sweet. We're going to be using POPs chapter 602 and the file ex6 for all the examples. It's just 3 examples. What do we have here? Okay, we've imported pandas and the warning because I turned off the warnings that we get because of value deprecation, which means that it's changed in pandas recently, and I have yet to know how to inform it here in my IDE, but we'll see what it is. We're going to be reading text files in chunks. The first example takes exc6.csv, which is this, and it has 10,000 rows and the header. Notice that the last column here, which they have named key, contains one character. It's either a letter or a number. When we run this example A, creating our data frame, I've executed here this little function called df.shape, which gives us this in parentheses here, 1,000 rows, 5 columns. You might find that useful in your work if you want to just know how many rows and columns a file has before processing it. When we print the data frame in, at least in this IDE, we get a few rows from the beginning and a few rows from the end of the file. Here we have the 5 starting rows and the last 5 rows. In example B, we use the same file, but we have limited the number of rows to display to a chunk of 3 rows, and that's what you see here in example B. Only 3 rows, 0, 1, and 2. In example, if we were to change this to a big number, say 30, this is what happens. We get 30 rows. If we make it 300, again we see that it displays only the first 5 and the last 5 rows. So there seems to be a limit there in terms of at least my IDE or Python in general. If we go back to the beginning of the program and we uncomment the set option there for pandas, this one is display.maxRows, and I've set it for 10,000. So in example A, which has no limiting number of rows, we should see the 10,000 rows. And there they are. The 10,000 rows in example A were output. Okay. And still in example B, we are limiting it to 30 rows. So example B has 30 rows. That's this one. In example C, I'm going to comment again that one because it takes a little long to process. in example C, we do a little bit of processing there. We read the CSV. We set a chunk size of 3,000 to start. That means that internally the program is going to process 3,000 rows at a time, but it will process the whole 10,000 regardless of the number you put there. And it's going to use the default behavior for non-applicable values, which is empty values, and the light will be flagged, written in the file as, written in the data frame as NaN, not a number. But we could have used sentinels here as well to determine the behavior of erroneous values in our file, like we saw on the last session. We create a series called tot. A series is nothing but a one-dimensional array with some nifty pandas functions. For each, and this variable here, piece, is declared right there in the for loop. For each piece in the chunk, we're going to add those in the column called key, and we're going to count them. If a value is non-applicable, we're going to not count it. We're going to put a 0 there for this totaling counting function, so it doesn't affect our total. So that's going to tell us how many of each letter and how many of each numbers we have in our key column. We're going to then sort it descending, so the largest values for the counts are on the top, and we're going to display for this run a slice. This is a slice here from the beginning, colon 10 of them. We're going to display 10 rows. And that is example C here. We see that it counted the E's, the X's, and so forth. And it's displaying 10 rows. And that's it. Now the problem that you may get a warning that this float 64, the type for that data frame, was recently changed to object. So if you run it and you get a warning, I'm not going to ignore the warnings for now so that we get the warning. So you can see if it happens to you what it is. It's just a warning. Okay. Now the warnings are going to appear. And you see that deprecation warning. That means that it's been renewed to something different. The default D-type for empty series will be object instead of float 64 in future versions. Specify a D-type explicitly to silence this warning. So I still don't know how to do that, but we need to specify object explicitly. I guess it's object. That's what it says here for that series. Okay. So there we go.